Hey gang, Stephen Marshall, KYLandlordlaw.com. Filming this Friday evening, a little after 5 o'clock, and man, what a week, right? What a month we've had this week. They always say if you've got bad news that you want to dump it on Friday afternoon because the least people will see it. Well, I'm hoping that's not the case because I want as many people to see this as possible because my goal is to keep everybody informed as to what's going on and in the legal system in the midst of this uncharted territory that we're all in. If you see my previous videos, you know that last week the court issued an order that all eviction hearings would be suspended until April the 13th. But their practice throughout the first 4 days of this week was to continue to accept eviction filings, continue to issue writs of possession on judgments that had been previously entered. The judges in Fayette County met today and have issued an order late this afternoon to suspend that practice. No more eviction filings, no more eviction hearings, and no more writs of possession will be issued until April 13th at the earliest. Okay, that's just Fayette County. I think that has been the practice for most of this week in Jefferson County. I'm not aware of that being the practice anywhere else in the state, but it's entirely possible. But I'm just talking about a change in Fayette County practices. If you were paying attention earlier in the week, you also saw that HUD issued an order that they are suspending foreclosures and evictions on all properties that are backed by FHA loans for 60 days. So no eviction filings, no eviction hearings, no writs of possession, no foreclosure filings, and no completion of foreclosures already in process for any property that is backed by an FHA loan. So, and that's for 60 days. So that's going to go on past the Fayette District Court order that was issued today. But the bottom line is the courts are not going to open back up until our government officials feel like we have a hold on this virus and how it's going to impact our country. So, we had this April 13th kind of reopen date. I don't know if courts will reopen then or not. Bottom line is we're all waiting until we've got a better hold on what this virus is doing. So keep April 13th in your mind, but there could very easily and likely will be another delay beyond that for further court proceedings. And that's really all I have this evening on legal issues. I did want to touch on some things that I'm seeing out in the field. This crisis is affecting all of us differently. If you're listening to this, there are some of you listening who have a portfolio with hundreds of rental units. You may be managing a property with hundreds of rental units. I also know there are people that are listening to this that are tenants. There are people that are listening to this that have 1, 2, 3 rental units. Okay, landlords and tenants come in all shapes and sizes as far as their properties and their predicaments. And that's why this crisis is going to affect us all differently. But some reports from the field that I'm seeing as I'm talking to folks and kind of watching the landscape, several landlords already have waived rent for April and May. I love hearing that. I hope that plenty of property owners are able to do that. I know that many of you aren't. But what I'm also seeing out there are rent reductions. I'm seeing late fees waived, credit card transaction fees being waived. I'm seeing rent due dates being pushed back from April the 1st to April the 15th and some even to the end of the month. So I'm seeing lots of things like that. Property owners and managers helping their tenants get signed up for unemployment, giving them direction on that. Lots of owners and tenants staying in communication about when payments are going to be made. But along with that, I know that you guys are hurting. I know that a lot of people are scared. They don't know how they're going to get their mortgage payments made. I was speaking with an out-of-state owner earlier this week, and she has 1 rental property. She got laid off from her job. Her tenant has not paid for January or February, and she had an eviction that was scheduled that has now been delayed until April 22nd. So she can't get her non-paying tenant out and get a paying tenant in and has no income from her job because she's been laid off. That is not an isolated situation. Okay, that's going on all over the place. So I know landlords are hurting. In my business, I also talk to tenants. They call my office because they're having issues with their landlord. And I've talked to tenants who have been laid off, who have had their hours reduced, who either themselves or their family members are having medical issues, typically not coronavirus related just yet, but for other reasons. And I've seen tenants who are working very hard and who are being very creative in coming up with ways to get their rent paid. So all of that is tough to see, but when I see the ones who are being very creative and doing what they can to get their rent paid, that is a very uplifting and inspiring type of thing. My wife and I we're commercial tenants on a property, and we're trying to on a retail business that is just dangling on, hasn't been forced to close yet. And so, we understand that predicament of how are we going to get the rent paid? And so tenants, we get that. Now, I'm also hearing about tenants who are blatantly boasting that they're going to game the system in the wake of this crisis and in the wake of these court orders. That's happening as well. And so what we know is that while this crisis affects us all differently, what it's going to do is reveal who we really are. Some of us are going to rise to the occasion. We're going to rise to the top. Some of us, it's going to be revealed that we're going to sink to the bottom. It's going to affect us all differently, but it's going to reveal who we really are. So what we can be sure of is that life is going to get harder for a while. But the silver lining, the good news is that just because life gets harder, that doesn't mean that it gets worse. In fact, history is replete with examples of how communities come together around these crises. And although life gets harder for everybody, and the standard of living might go down, the quality of life and the level of happiness and joy actually goes up to the point where people long for the days of the crisis because they were happier. And so that's got to be our goal in Lexington, okay? That's got to be the thing that we're pushing for, whether you're a landlord with tons of margin or whether you're a landlord who's barely hanging on, or whether you're a tenant who's trying to figure out your next move. We've got to be in it together. We've got to figure it out together. And based on my conversations, what I'm seeing out in the field, I think that's going to happen. So let's all push towards that goal. Hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe. I'm sure we'll be in touch next week.